Alright guys, getting ready to install this backup camera in my niece's Subaru here. It's a Boyle license plate frame backup camera and a Kenwood double DIN radio so that she'll be able to see the backup images on the screen here when she's backing up. So the first thing that we need to do is remove the panel on the other side of this so that we can get the wire through this back panel. We're actually going to have to drill a little bit of a hole here so that we can get the wire through. So what I'm going to do first is pull the plastic panel on the inside of the door hatch here and see where a safe spot to drill through is. Now you can see here it just has these little plastic clips. You just got to be careful not to lose or break any of them. But that's what secures that to the back panel there. Alright guys, so you want to measure where you're going to drill the hole. And double check on the other side that there's not anything that you're going to drill into. I recommend using one of these step bits here. It's also a good idea to take some primer and spray the hole with some primer so that it doesn't rust. Alright, the license plate frame comes with this cable here with this little connector. And it also has a little rubber grommet on it that allows you to be able to put this in the metal on the car so that you can get a good seal for the wire to go through the hole in the metal there. Alright, so now what you want to do is drill holes big enough to fit these little bolts through these little plastic inserts so that when you put the license plate frame on there, you're able to get the bolts through these holes here. So take the wire and push it through the hole there, and then insert the little rubber grommet into the hole. Once you get the wire pushed through the hole there, then go ahead and push your bolts through the holes. Now you could just use the standard license plate frame screws, but this is going to make the camera a lot harder to steal. So if someone were to happen to see the backup camera on the back of the car, they can't easily just come over and unscrew it. This is a lot harder to take off because you really have to get on the other side of the hatch panel here and access the nuts on the other side of these. Alright guys, so you can see I've got the bolts tightened up to the license plate frame there, and you can see the wire that's gone through, and I sprayed some primer through the hole there just to keep that hole from rusting. And then we've got the rubber grommet there and the wire shoved through and then wire tied down here below. Alright guys, so now you've got to take this cable here and run it along this pillar inside the cab and then run it up through this hole right here, through this little rubber grommet up into this, and then run the wire up over to the license plate frame. Alright guys, due to the size of the diameter of this connector, it's pretty tough to get it up through this rubber grommet, but you just kind of have to just keep working it until you get it up through, and then shove it up through the holes of the door here, and then just fish it up the rest of the way and connect it to the license plate frame. Make sure you reinstall your rubber grommets. Alright guys, so you can see I've got the cable ran down through the door jamb here with this little rubber grommet. Got that all inserted back. Ran the wire up along this little area here and used wire ties to secure the cable. And then I've got it plugged into the license plate frame portion of the cable, which goes in behind the door and then right through that little rubber grommet there. Now it's time to take and reinstall our panel up there. And you can see this one little clip here stayed in the panel. Make sure you remove any clips that stay in the panel and then reinstall them back in their correct spots so that you don't break the clips when putting it back on. Alright guys, so I've got the panel reinstalled there, and running the cable down up along the headliner, and then I've taken it and just kind of taped it along this pillar here, and then I'm going to run it behind this panel. Just shove the cable, you know, I've pulled this rubber trim out here, and we'll shove the cable along the side there, and then we'll pull this panel up and actually run the cable underneath this. You can see you've got the factory wiring cables along here. We'll run this cable along with those. Alright guys, so I've got the cable behind the carpet here. I've ran it along the back door on up to the front door, and then the cable's coming out of the carpet right here. So you take the cable and you run it across behind the dash there. Now it's time to wire up the new radio and get this old radio out. Alright guys, on this radio, to get it removed, you need to pry along this side rail carefully to pull the little locking tabs. And then on these manual heater controls, you actually have to disconnect the cables. So it's easiest to pull the glove box out, and then behind the glove box are those cables right there. Those cables hook to that little white mechanism there. That's part of the heating and air conditioning system. There's a cable on each side. Alright guys, so you can see I've got the dash panel out, and these two cables that go to the heating and air conditioning box, you have to carefully disconnect those in order to pull this entire dash panel out of the car. Alright guys, so now we're going to be covering the basics of how to wire up this backup camera. Wiring up the backup camera is actually fairly simple. There's not really very many wires to it, but there's a couple things that are really important that you get. And that is the reverse signal. So when you put the vehicle into reverse, you need to tell the screen that it's in reverse so that the backup camera actually kicks on when the vehicle's in reverse. So that's one of the main wires that you need. Also, with this particular stereo that we're putting in, it is part of a DVD system. So we're going to be hooking it up to the parking brake, which means that the DVD system will only work if the parking brake's on. So what I'm going to do is show you guys how to get those signals. Alright guys, so you could just tap onto the reverse wire bulb. This is something that you can just basically take a T-tap and tap onto the reverse wire bulb. On this particular car, they've made it a little bit easier because they have the reverse wire and the parking brake wire directly to the factory radio location. If this vehicle was equipped with the higher end navigation system, it would actually use these wires to hook it up. So what I'm going to do is show you guys how to test the circuit so that you understand which wires to hook up. Alright guys, so to do this, you really need a computer safe test light. This is one from Snap-on here. Really like this particular test light. You can hook this end to either ground or power and test for ground circuits and power circuits. It's basically kind of like a multimeter with a little light in it. Alright guys, so to wire up this radio, you need one of these harnesses here that allow you to connect to the factory radio harness. Now this is what plugs into the back of the radio and sends all the power and the signals to the radio, and also sends all the speaker wire signals to the speakers, and is basically the main wiring harness for the radio. This additional harness here has the wires in it like the reverse wire and the parking brake wire, and we won't be using this on our aftermarket radio, but we will be getting a couple signals off of it. So we're going to have to cut this particular harness back and get the wires for the backup or reverse lamp, and then also the parking lamp. So you've got, you know, whatever looks like about 8 to 10 wires inside this harness. what you have to do is determine which one is which so that you hook the correct ones up, and what I'm going to do is show you how to do that. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth on how to wire the radio up because this is more of a video that's how to wire a backup camera. So if you want more detailed information on how to wire up a radio, I would suggest checking out one of my other videos pertaining to that. Alright guys, so to determine the correct wires, first we're going to take the factory ground on the back of the radio, and I've stripped this back here, and I'm going to hook the test light up to it. Alright, so I've already gone through and figured out which wire is what, but what I'm going to do is show you guys how I did that. So I've determined that this brown wire with the yellow stripe is actually the wire that sends the reverse signal. So it actually sends 12 volts to that wire when the vehicle is in reverse. By hooking this wire up, it's going to kick on our backup screen when it's in reverse. So what I'm going to do is we'll put this little pin in here, and since we have this hooked up to ground, what's going to happen is the little red light is going to light up when it's in reverse. So I'm going to put the key in the ignition. Alright guys, so when I put the car into reverse, the test light's going to turn red. That means that 12 volts is being sent on this wire when it's in reverse. You can see that. Now I'll go back to park, and it turns it off. So that's going to be our reverse wire signal. Now the next wire we're going to hook up to and test for is the parking brake. So you've got the parking brake lever right here. Now this doesn't send 12 volts. It actually sends a ground signal that the vehicle's in park. So when you put the parking brake on, it's going to send a ground signal to the radio to allow the DVD player to work if you wanted to watch a DVD. Now to hook this up, to test for it, you can't have your test light on the ground because there's no power there to light the light up. So what you have to do is actually hook this up to power. Now what I've done is I've taken the radio wiring harness, the interface harness, and we're just temporarily going to use that because this yellow wire here has 12 volt constant power on it. We're going to take the test light and stick that on the end there. Now we're giving our test light 12 volts. So whenever we hook it up to a ground signal, it's actually going to turn the light green to tell us that we're getting ground. So what I'm going to do is just touch this wire right here, which is the ground, and you'll see that the light goes green. Like that there. So we've got the green light. Now we know that this is hooked up correctly, so when I take this wire here, this wire is actually the parking brake wire. Now I don't have the parking brake on, so the light isn't lighting up right now green. Okay, so when I pull the parking lever up, it turns it green. Take it off, pull it up, take it off. Okay, so that's sending the ground signal to that wire. So that's how you determine which wires to hook up. It's best to do either with a multimeter or a computer safe test light like this one here. Makes it really easy. Alright guys, so now what you do here is hook these wires up. So this one here goes to the parking brake, and then this one here goes to the reverse wire input on the radio. So these wires go directly into the radio, and we're going to hook it up to the two wires that we tested here in the wiring harness. Now there's a few different type of connectors you can use. You can use these heat shrink butt connectors, you can use white caps, you can solder them. Whichever works best for you, just go ahead and do that. It's always just a good idea to double check your connections, kind of tug on them, make sure they're not going to come apart on you. Now you can use a lighter or a heat gun like I've got here. Alright guys, so I just want to review the connections with you here real quick. So we've got the reverse wire hooked up here to the harness. We've got the parking brake wire hooked up. The only other wires are a ground and a switch power that we've hooked into the radio wiring harness. We've just tapped that in with the regular radio wiring. So basically you just have power, ground, the reverse, and then you have the parking brake for the DVD player. If you don't have a DVD player, then you won't be using the parking brake wire. Then you just take the little wire here that comes with the backup camera and then plug it into the backup camera cable. Plug those two together. Now you do have a little switch that comes with this here. Alright guys, so this little button here allows you to reverse the image inside the camera. Now we've got the power and ground wired up in through this harness here in these connections. We've got the parking brake cable and the reverse wire hooked up. Basically you just plug this little cable in here to the cable that we've ran back to the backup camera. Alright guys, so now we've got the radio just kind of temporarily setting in here with a couple screws in the dash kit. We've got it all wired up. Just want to make sure everything's working correctly before we put the dash all the way back together. So we're going to switch it into reverse here and just make sure the camera comes on. And it does, and it's the right direction, so we don't need to press the little button to get it to reverse. If the blue toolbox was on the left, then our camera would be reversed and we need to reverse it. So this allows you to be able to mount the camera on the front or the back so that the image is correct. So the camera goes off when you put it back into park, comes on when you put it into reverse, and then goes back out when you put it into drive. Okay, so with this radio here, you've got the Bluetooth audio, so it'll stream the music via Bluetooth. You can hook your iPod up to it, and you can obviously listen to the radio. You've got the Pandora functions, you've got the Android functions in here, Spotify, some additional features. Alright guys, so everything's working out really good. We'll just finish setting this up, put it all back together, and we'll have this thing all done. Alright guys, got everything all done. Everything turned out great. Got the backup camera installed, got the radio all wired up, dash panel all put back into place. I've adjusted the parking lines so that when you put it into reverse, you've got this red line there. You can see I've put a little paper towel. I don't know if you could see that in the camera, but that's fairly close to the bumper. So you can adjust these lines so that as you're backing up, you kind of know where you're at. You've got your orange safe line, you've got this green line down here. So that's pretty nice. Everything's working out really good. Really happy with the install.